40, Town of Raleigh Wetland Protection Bylaw and Stormwater Management Erosion Control Bylaw. Notice is given that both a video and an audio recording will be made of this meeting. The agent will now call the roll for attendance.
Thank you. Arthur Page.
Yep.
Kurt Turner.
Here.
Bob Garner.
Here.
Judy Keys. Dan Shinnick.
Here.
Sam Strife, absent. Howard Vogel.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do have a quorum present.
All right, that'll bring us to a first item, which would be payroll and or vendor bills.
I have both tonight and respectfully ask the board to approve payroll for myself and our hardworking secretary.
Judy?
And the chairman's review of hours worksheet. And if I also may requesting reimbursement for the purchase of some ink cartridges for our office printer. Mr. Chairman, that's the backup receipt for the cartridges. And then we ordered a replenishment of our number 10 envelopes with the commissions and the town seal, return address and the town seal on it. And this is the backup invoice for that. In order to save money, we buy the envelopes blank from Staples and then just have to pay for it. That's it for payroll bills.
All right, the next item is, there's 3 items. It's the minutes of past meetings which were sent to us electronically. We'll start with the first one with January 23rd, 2018. Did everybody have a chance to take a look at that? Any questions or problems? Do we have a motion to accept that as presented?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
And that would bring us to...
Unanimous approved, thank you very much.
That would bring us to our next one, which is the June 18th, 2013. Did everybody have a chance to take a look at that? Was there any questions? Errors or anything on there? Okay, do I hear a motion to accept that as presented? Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous, approved.
Unanimous
Thank you.
approved. And that brings us to the last of the three for this week, this meeting, and that would be the July 30th, 2013. Did everybody have a chance to look at the electronic filing of that? Any questions, problems? Do I hear a motion to accept that as presented?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Unanimous, approved, thank you.
All right, the next item is the conservation restriction at Mahaffey Farm, 179 Newbury Road, map 1, parcel lot 35, Essex County, Greenbelt. Stand up and address and introduce yourself.
Sure, good evening everyone. Vanessa Johnson Hall, Assistant Director of Land Conservation at Essex County Greenbelt Association. Nearing the end of the finish line on the Mahaffey Conservation Restriction. I think you all received copies of 3 documents. Is that right, Brett? A copy of, as you know, the project is to preserve 28.8 acres of farmland at Mahaffey Farm off of Newbury Road in Rowley. We're doing that in 2 steps, just because of the ownership structure. The land, as it sits right now, is owned and is under 2 ownerships. Yeah. So right now there are 2 lots. This lot is owned by now Bill Mahaffey. That contains the farmhouse where Louise Mahaffey lives and her grandson Michael, Bill and Maggie's daughter. So that's owned by them, and then everything around it is owned by the Harrison Tenney Trust. And that's how the land was divided, I think it was a year ago, July, as part of the settlement of the estate. So part 1 is for us jointly to acquire a conservation restriction from the Tenney Trust on all of this acres except this portion right here. A second later, the Harrison Tenney Trust will then give this land to the Mahaffeys. 1 second after that, the Mahaffeys will grant us a conservation restriction amendment, that's document 2, that will essentially add in this piece into the conservation restriction, resulting in the final conservation restriction configuration of 28.8 acres. So what you see that's shaded here is unrestricted. That's the main homestead area and the most kind of actively used area of the property for residential purposes. We've worked really hard on the conservation restriction with the Mahaffey family, since they are the ultimate holders of the conservation restriction. The conservation restriction has received preliminary review by the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. It will have to go back to them. Thank you. It'll have to go back to them, obviously, for final review and signatures. But before that, we're looking for your input on the conservation restriction. It will also go to the Board of Selectmen, Town Council, and it still has to go to the Mahaffey's attorney as well. So there's still a few steps for finalizing this before it ultimately goes to the state. I'm happy to answer questions.
What do you see for a time frame?
Well, it appears that this has to go back to a town meeting vote, and hopefully for an administrative matter, just substituting in the revised plan. The meets and bounds, the boundary of the conservation restriction has not changed, but we've added more labeling, we've added in the trail, a symbol for the parking area, the storage area. These are referenced in the conservation restriction, and so this is not the exact plan that was referenced in the article, so it's town council's opinion that it has to go back to town meeting to revise the article to substitute in the new plan. So, that said, we hope to be able to close sometime in May. That would be our hope.
Could you refresh me as to how the payment of this is going to work?
Yeah, so the town is contributing $100,000. Greenbelt has fundraised $150,000, and the Mahaffey themselves are bringing $200,000 to closing to make up the funding gap. So that will all go into escrow, and the attorneys will work their magic, and at the end of the day, we'll have a jointly held conservation restriction, and the Mahaffeys will own the land.
Now, is the town's 100,000 already in place, or does something further have to be done on that?
It's already in place as far as I know. It's authorized to be spent. So, what needs to happen is, I think after that second town meeting vote to substitute in the plan, then I think just the technicalities of having a check issued or the funds wired to escrow. I don't believe any further approvals are necessary, since town meeting vote authorized that the funding be spent over a year ago.
Okay, you may want to check on that just to nail that down.
Mm-hmm.
I did have a technical question. I have not read the restriction itself, but I read the amendment, and a thought occurred to me in looking at the subordination of the life estate is that there's no recitation of consideration, which is a technical legal point, and it seems to me that the document could be improved by having your attorneys look at that and put in something there.
Okay, she did look at this, but I'll bring that up to her, and it might be also that the attorney for the Mahaffeys would raise that as well. So
Who
a
are you meeting
recitation.
with next?
I'm sorry?
Who are you meeting with next on this?
I believe next, Brent, it will go to town council for review, and then.
Town council and I are already reviewing it. When we get to that point, I have a communication for the commission
All right.
Yeah.
in regards to that. It's already authorized to engage town council.
And so what I would like to do after that is then give the Mahaffeys an opportunity to have their attorney review it. Tennies will also have to review it, even though they won't own the land at the end of the day. They still have, they're the ones who are signing the original, granting the original CR. So once all those approvals, and assuming there are no changes where it has to be brought back to the town, then we can proceed to getting authorization for signing from the Conservation Commission.
From the Conservation Commission, it goes to the
Board
Okay,
of
that's
Selectmen.
what I was
That's right.
thinking.
And then to the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs.
So I think at this time I'd like to turn it over to Brent.
So what I'd like to do is,
One more question, if I may.
Oh.
Vanessa, did the state's review did they come up with any suggested revisions? Does this reflect the state's,
It reflects the state's initial revisions.
so they're
Yeah.
not apt to have a lot more?
Hopefully not.
In the past, that's always been problematic on these CRs, but
Yeah, I can't guarantee anything.
understood.
so anyway, your agent has been, did seek approval and has been working with town council. This is memorandum that was prepared today. Let me just say it now. So, before we talk about the suggested recommendations on here, let me state that the conservation restriction and the amendment to the conservation restriction have already been being worked on or whatever, and not only, and Vanessa has told you about the fact that the state has looked at it or whatever to give it a go-over and help us, get further along with what we're looking at to be less subject to modification. but also Vanessa and has been nice enough to been interacting with our office and myself, which has also allowed me to get town council involved ahead of time. So this is very good. The fact that there's a very short memorandum here with just a few recommendations on it is a testimony to the fact that this document has already been scrutinized, and there's already been a review and a back and forth and an interactive process on that. So that being said, there's just the desire to firm up the fact that through the process, there was the desire expressed, especially through the Board of Selectmen's office, about the parking area. And so the recommendation is that right now, there's this kind of may develop language in there that doesn't necessarily give everyone any type of certainty within either a window or whatever that this would be implemented. And so the suggestion on town council's part is that that be firmed up so we've got a clear expectation of when that, because it's key to the public access and the public's use of the trails to have an area there parked, because Newbury Road is not a town road that you can pull over easily on. If you ever have the misfortune to get a flat tire along a section of it, you understand real quickly that other than a neighbor's driveway, you're kind of, don't have any place else to go. And then I think that the date expressed in the document is possibly the date from the earlier versions of the plan, and as well as the fact that we know this has been talked about, and we can see that on the amended CR is a specific place for putting the plan book and plan number when it does get recorded. We just want to make sure that, you know, that there is a recordation of the plan that's applicable to the second step of the process when the CR amendment gets activated, recorded, or I don't know what the made official.
Executed.
And then the suggestion in regards to the memorandum of understanding with the expectation, of course, that that document is not a recorded document, and also by its very nature, it kind of needs some flexibility to it where it might be updated and revised. As we just found one phrase in there in the section of B1, to the extent possible, we thought that was just absolutely, I think that had to do with the monitoring reports or whatever, and we can't understand any reason that there wouldn't be the ability for Essex County Greenbelt to transmit the results of their monitoring report to the town. You know,
Yeah, I don't recall that.
I mean, maybe they expect a solar flare on the day after you do this or something, you know, electronic communications would be wiped out, but normally it's the kind of thing that would just get transmitted to our
Yeah,
office
I
and
don't
we know
recall
about
that,
it.
but I'll certainly do
Yeah.
that.
So, we figured that wouldn't be subject to us getting in too much of an arm wrestling match about it. And then we also believe that there should be signature opportunity for the Board of Selectmen in regards to the memorandum of understanding also.
Is the memorandum of understanding talking about the memorandum of agreement? I'm confused about this.
Are you pointing to a document that's titled Memorandum of Agreement? Yeah, that's what it's talking about.
Well, then,
That's what that is. That is a memorandum of understanding. It is titled Memorandum of Agreement.
okay.
Any further questions?
Thanks.
Any questions from the audience on this?
Now, how does the commission want to proceed on this? Do you wish to authorize the office with the input of town council to work with Vanessa and Essex Greenbelt's council in regards to trying to work out the language, and then just once once
Well,
that's sort of
yeah.
solidified, bring it back to the commission
That's why I was
for
asking
final-
who should be meeting with next in the time frame.
Well, I haven't read the.
I haven't had a chance to
And
read it
and
either.
I'd like to read that before we
Okay.
sign off on that.
So can we?
Oh, for sure,
So can we have it so that we will review this on our time, and then we'll bring it up at the next meeting with anything that needs to be addressed at that point?
Right.
Okay.
May the office proceed working with Vanessa on
Please,
what
yes,
town
yeah.
council has identified also? Okay.
Right, just to.
And you'd like to continue it to
For
the
the
next
next meeting?
meeting as a date certain?
Yeah. Would that be fine?
Absolutely. May I just say one more thing about the memorandum of agreement? When they're co-holders of a conservation restriction, EEA, the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, requires that one of the holders be primarily responsible for monitoring and enforcement of the conservation restriction, and that we kind of have an agreement on the side that lays that out. So that's what the memorandum of understanding is all about. We have a stewardship staff that oversees all of our conservation restriction monitoring and stewardship. We have a designated, a designated fund for enforcing conservation restrictions. So we usually offer to be the primary grantee to relieve the town of that burden of annual monitoring and enforcement, and sort of being the lead on any enforcement issues if that should come up. So that's the intent of the memorandum of understanding.
All right, so we'll put you on for the, actually have the same wording as we did this, for the next meeting, which would be March 6th.
Yeah, we'll, should have a vote.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Okay, so let's continue to March 6th.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And does everyone have copies of that? Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Need some additional ones in case anybody got me lost. All right.
That brings us to our 7:45, which is an informal discussion, a concept plan for 430 Westfield Street, map 12, parcel lot 3, Robert Nixon, Bitterroot LLC.
Good evening, Jill Manhart here on behalf of Rob Nixon and Bitterroot LLC. The purpose of this evening's discussion is simply to kind of go over informally.
Just a minute.
Oh, yes.
Can you just hold on one second and allow me to access the electronic documents so that
Take your
it
time.
can be displayed and,
Oops, that's me.
Marianne's old property? Yeah.
Yes.
okay, I'm not gonna zoom in too much as we start off the conversation, so that we get the overview of the whole property. Thank you very much for your
Oh,
patience.
most certainly, please. So again, this evening's purpose is to really just provide you with an overview. We recognize that this is an important parcel to the town and that it provides connectivity between other town-owned parcels and what is considered, if you will, prime conservation area. The areas shown in green are what we intend to provide back to the town. And speaking of CRs, there most likely would be one as well on this particular property, should you choose to do it, because the green will be conveyed to the town. What we're looking to do is basically an open space subdivision, open space conservation subdivision. And the particular proposal in front of you is a development of, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Taylor Lane. It's actually a street that, believe it or not, exists off of Weathersfield Street, but it's predominantly unimproved. I mean, it's there, you can see it, it meanders through, but it is not in an improved way. the purpose would be, or the intent would be to develop it as a subdivision roadway, which we have to go before the planning board clearly for, and to develop it with 40 lots. What you can see is, I think somebody had mentioned, it is the Moran property. It's basically the apple orchard, the Moran property, and one other property. Bruce's, thank you. Bruce Tompkins' property. So we have control of all 3 properties at the present time, and I believe we're going to start doing the permitting in the next month, or at least begin the process of submitting permits. The reason we're here is obviously because this is an important piece for the Conservation Commission, and we wanted to be able to preview it with you and understand any of the concerns you may have relative to receiving those parcels, or anything relative to the way in which we've designed our concept plan. I will tell you that we did provide the fire department with a turnaround at the midpoint of the road, which is something that's nice for the fire department to be able to come in, turn around, and go out and just be able to make it that short of a distance. As you can see, we did design it with a not a cul-de-sac, but a traditional, I don't know what everybody calls it, a loop is what I call it. And that's really a very, very, very broad overview of the property. And again, you know, we would probably be before you at some point again for the CR if you chose to do it and wanted us to put it on. I don't know if you have any questions, comments, just general discussion about it.
Are those streets off the head of the loop, the paper?
Yeah, well, those are just connections. You're supposed to provide for connections to adjacent properties, so we just provide for connections. They are not streets. We have absolutely no intention of constructing them presently, which is why they show, and the way they're shown are basically lots. So to the extent there were proposals to extend it, then we'd have to come back for approval, but those are not approved streets. The only part that would be is the loop. And we did provide access in the looped area to the town, the land that we would be proposing to provide to land. Not only does the town have access off the front portions, but also off the rear portion. And I will let you know that where Taylor Lane does exist, does cross over the wetland stream that you can see that goes, I think is that north to south, Mr. Braze?
Top of the plains
Yeah,
north, yeah.
okay. So it goes north to south, and there is already a crossing and going over that particular stream.
But the flow is south to north,
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
because it goes into the Mill River.
Oh, there is. That I
Right,
know.
on that map, so is the easterly of their green area, that's south of their road, is that all touching the Dodge? Is that all Dodge Reservation?
Yes.
And then north, is that all Mill River Conservation Area? Or do you don't know?
Maybe if you turn me loose, I'll talk about a bunch of stuff and answer your
okay.
questions in regards to that.
I'm just trying to understand as that
Right,
ties
I
into
understand.
everything
We
else.
save him for last.
Okay.
That was good.
So let me talk about, first off, the proponent here has made a long-term effort and been conducting conceptual talks with various town departments, including the Conservation Department, in regards to this proposal. I'd like to give a brief overview of the wetland resource areas. It's kind of unfortunate having the green on there because on the one hand, it doesn't help when actually explain some of the various wetland resource areas that are involved here. But on the other hand, it shows the applicant has made a very concerted effort to try and minimize any development activity that would be in jurisdictional wetland resource areas. So let's start with the watercourses. So Taylor Brook, which starts, and surprisingly enough, it starts a very short stone's throw right behind Ayers Park, the ball field. Originates out of there. It comes down, and as it's flowing in this manner, a large proportion of it, this is the Dodge Reservation, this white area here, all the way going up to here. And Smith Lane is over here. Smith Lane, the Girl Scouts moved it a little bit because there's a private parcel in here. But this is all Taylor Brook, as it's called. And Taylor Brook is flowing in a northerly direction, It's a perennial stream. There's one pre-existing crossing where the driveway to the farmhouse, or the farm road, crossed it. It has seen, unfortunately, attentions by our small, furry, aquatic mammals, the beavers. So there's been interaction with the conservation department out there due to those issues. It then flows into the Mill River, and so there is floodplain in this area. There's floodplain for both Taylor Brook. There's also floodplain for the Mill River. So it is, you know, not a good area to develop, so it is a very good area. It's very environmentally sensitive, so the fact that it's being proposed as part of dedicated open space that would be provided to the town is a good thing. This is where Weathersfield Street is, and Weathersfield Street makes sort of a 90-degree bend there to orient. This is where Smith Lane, as the walking path, comes down. That is used for both horseback riding and used for public access to get into the Dodge Reservation. So Taylor Brook, Mill River, now to talk about some other wetland resource areas. One of the reasons for this little bump out here is that there's a potential vernal pool in the woods. This area is forested. It hasn't seen, I think the edge of the fields is in this area somewhere. There is a vernal pool with an associated isolated vegetated wetland that's adjoining it, and there's been a concerted effort here to stay out and not have any development activity in the 100-foot vernal pool habitat. Now there's wetland resource areas on abutting property over here. This is Deborah Rossi's property, which fronts on Weathersfield Street. I've had no permission to actually enter onto her property, but from past wetland delineations, there's an indication that there may be one or two vernal pools on that property, but there are definitely vegetated wetland resource areas on that property. And again, there's a concerted effort made to keep development activity, and these lots have been configured so it should be capable of developing those lots without getting into or any intrusion into those sensitive areas around the pools. The farm fields have a lot of what we call wet meadow or bordering vegetated wetland. That's mostly herbaceous plants, i.e. wet fields, wet meadows, or whatever. Again, so a lot of this area, even though it has seen past agricultural use, is actually bordering vegetated wetlands. And again, there's been a concerted effort not to have any development activity intrude into that. There's 3 parcels that are being put together for this. The parcel that is here that has no development proposed for it at all does not have a lot of wetland resource areas except for Taylor Brook and the 200-foot riverfront area. But that is a critical parcel because of the YMCA camp with children. This parcel, from what's been submitted to the office, could have the potential capability of having 10 to 12 residential lots on it if it was destined for development. So the fact that it would be preserved and protected and given to the town would provide an extra level of protection for us having the children's camp there that's presently operated by the Ipswich YMCA. So, contiguous town-owned open space. Yes, in this general area here, we have a number of lots that Bank of New England gave outright to the town, and just on the opposite side of Weathersfield Street is conservation land that follows the Mill River corridor that was previously given to the town. So not only do we have riverine habitat, which has the highest wildlife value and sensitivity, we have floodplain that's protected, we also have contiguous joining to previously protected open space. So that's providing a
a good wildlife corridor coming up into this area and coming up into this area here, so wildlife can continue to go down, all the way down to, almost to Glen Street, where the Mill River goes underneath Glen Street, at least just a short distance back on there. So this would, there's very high wildlife habitat value here. There's, this is a very generous offer, and there's appears to be a lot of sensitivity to the wetland resource areas that occur on these parcels, as well as a sensitivity to helping the town protect the Dodge Reservation, where the stream is the boundary over here, so we currently only have one side of the stream and not the other side, but this is, would give the other side of the bank of Taylor Brook, which again would provide that wildlife corridor that a lot of wildlife likes to travel and follow watercourses. Any other questions, or did that answer?
No, you answered that's what I had a feeling that's what this was pulling off, which is absolutely wonderful.
Any questions from the audience on this? Go ahead, please.
Curious as to.
Your name.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
can you identify yourself?
Yep, Seth Lambert, 448 Weathersfield Street. Just curious, could you indicate approximately where the farmhouse is now in your residence and all that?
Yeah. It's very close, I think, to the proposed bump out, isn't it?
Right on the first two lots.
Oh, is it up here? Okay,
Right there.
all right, up there. My apologies.
So according to that, there'll be no building essentially from the house to the street. Everything's gonna be from the house into the woodland area.
Yeah. That's what's being presented on this layout, yes.
Thank you.
Except for construction of the roadway,
Right.
which I assume means some sort of bridging.
I mean, that would be a town road.
Yes, it would.
Eventually, yes,
Not a
we
private
believe they
town.
would
That's
seek
for
street
sure.
acceptance.
Yeah. So it has all
the bells and
the
whistles,
things that go.
Would that end up with above ground utilities, or would that be?
No underground.
all underground, because we build, so apologize. So to the extent that the approvals go through, we would propose a public way to go in. As a result of that, we have to comply with all subdivision rules and regulations, which means underground utilities, stormwater management will need to be provided, and the construction of the way will be consistent with what the current standards are.
The commissioners have any concerns or thoughts in regards?
Not at this time, at this stage. Where are you as far as the other departments?
Sure. So we have yet to appear before them. We wanted to come here first because of the concerns, number one, relative to, as Mr. Brazak said, the sensitivity of the area. We are going to probably file, I would say, in the next month.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So because it's an open space residential subdivision, we have to propose the concept plan, which we'll do with this, and then we go in. So you'll probably, I personally like to do them in tandem because there's a lot of cooperative effort between the two departments. So we'll probably submit planning, and then you'll receive your notice of intent.
Well, we were told that there's an ANRAD forthcoming.
Yes.
Oh, okay, yes, we do have
Abbreviated
to, you
notice
know
of
what, I
resource area
apologize.
delineation,
We
so
are.
that we can confirm
Yes,
a lot of the wetlands boundaries.
because we will want an ORAD to be able to proceed as well, so I apologize. Yes, there is gonna be an ANRAD application, so you're gonna get it beforehand.
But you pretty much left us out of it because of your plant design plan, so,
Yeah.
which is good. That's what
Then,
Well, right, but there's been a lot of involvement in.
Right.
Oh, there's Mr. Nixon.
And in fact, Mr. Nixon has been very welcoming in regards to inviting me. I've already reviewed a lot of the delineation. In fact, I assisted with the clear identification of the potential vernal pool that's in this area, as well as the fact that it wasn't just confined to the depression of the pool, that there also was this isolated vegetated wetland area associated with that, and then in discussions to help the concept plan be as minimum intrusive to wetland resource areas as could possibly be done, while still
maintaining the integrity of a subdivision and providing the necessary public safety through the link of the road system so that police and fire and all emergency vehicles would have appropriate access.
I realize this is pretty preliminary, but do you anticipate infiltration of drain basins?
Yes, we'll end up having to because of the stormwater requirements, so we'll have to infiltrate a certain amount. So absolutely, the roofs will all be infiltrated. Some of the other, runoff will have to be treated and infiltrated as well.
But nothing beyond individual lot infiltration?
Well, the roadway, there'll have to be some treatment of that water coming off it, because that's a long roadway. So I'm sure the best management practices are gonna require infiltration above just the roof drains. So my guess is, we'll end up having to take in, we probably are gonna have to use some of the green area, which we can get back, because it'll be the town's property anyway, because there'll be easements. We'll probably have to do some drainage structures in the road going, because you have to capture it and you can't go too far, and given the topography, I'm not 100%. So the only, if you will, intrusion into the land we intend to donate may be a stormwater facility. Obviously, they have to lie, I think your requirements require us to stay outside the buffer, right, Mr. Prezak?
No, they could be
They can go within the buffer?
They could be in the buffer zone,
Okay,
yeah, but
some
there wouldn't be
people don't
any,
let us.
there would have to be, can't remember, whether it's
Infiltration
35 feet or something, the
Infiltration still
discharge.
needs to be so different, so the answer to your question is, yes, we will infiltrate, and then one of the things that I hadn't mentioned is you will probably see a stormwater, facility on a portion of that green space once we come through with the plan. Thank you.
This project would be subject to stormwater
Management also.
management permitting also, as well as notice of intent process for the construction of the roadway access, and then the possibility of either some notices of intent or even RDAs for some of the lots.
That's what I was gonna ask, if you wanted us to, so sometimes boards want us to let you know ahead of time where all the intrusion's gonna be. There's very little buffer activity even for the home construction. So you prefer us just do the subdivision, get the roadway done, and then come back with all the homes to the extent they're already, okay.
Yeah.
And then obviously the road gets stormwater permit, and each home gets a stormwater permit.
Well, the whole project would,
It
well,
does,
depending
but
on how
each
you wanna do
individual
it,
home
yeah.
still has to undergo scrutiny because of the,
All right. No other questions?
wonderful, well, you'll see us shortly with our filings.
I imagine we
Appreciate
thank
your
you very
time,
much.
thank you very
Thank
much.
Hey, Brian, as a point of interest, is this the same, some of that land, is that where the harvesting's been going on?
I'm sorry?
Is that where the tree harvesting's been going on?
Yes.
Well, only on
Yeah.
this parcel down here, because this is under another ownership, and they had filed for the harvesting plan.
Yeah. I'm just wondering,
Yeah, that is part of it, but on the very bottom.
on the bottom hand, or the bottom quarter of it. Okay.
Thank you.
No, those aren't two proposed roadways on that.
As I explained, they could possibly become two roadways, but they are not approved, they are not granted. They're just lots that we create. To the extent there's gonna be some connection, they can make it in the future, and then we come back.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate your time.
Good presentation.
Hey, Brent, did anybody not sign this?
Yep, there's some folks coming in from the hallway. Past the-
Okay.
All right, this brings us to our 8 PM item. This is a legal notice for the Raleigh Conservation Commission in accordance with the Wetlands Protection Act, Mass General Law 131, Section 40 is amended by the Town of Raleigh Wetlands Protection Bylaw. A public hearing will be held on Tuesday, February 13th, 2018, 8 p.m., Room 5, Town Hall Annex, 39 Central Street, to consider the notice of intent for the application for Herman A. Patrick Hahn, 420 Newburyport Turnpike, LLC, for the proposed construction of a gravel trailer storage area, which includes the filling of an existing 290 feet by 45 foot infiltration basin and the construction of a new 180 by 40 subsurface infiltration basin as replacement, possibly within the restricted 25 foot no cut, no disturb zone, 800 square feet, and a 100 foot buffer zone of bordering vegetated wetlands at 420 Newburyport Turnpike, map 18, parcel lot 3 in Raleigh.
No, Mr. Chairman, I apologize, we actually are not gonna open this hearing immediately, as we need to have a discussion in regards to the applicant has submitted a request for a waiver from a portion of the bylaw fee.
Okay. Let us start that.
You guys.
Charlie.
How are you?
Good.
Hi, I'm Charlie Ware, I'm with Meridian Associates, civil engineer on the project. Sandy Patrickin is here tonight as well, and he is the applicant. While I'm setting this up, we can talk about the waiver. The project is really trying to get some more laydown areas for the operation that Sandy runs at Ipswich Bay Glass. And the idea we came up on that is, and actually if I set this up, I can probably explain myself better. I'm going to be right in front of you. I'm all right.
While you're doing that, maybe Sandy can tell us what a laydown area is. Place where I can take a nap.
Just a gravel yard where we can park trailers.
Only parking.
Yes.
I'm going to read the letter that was addressed to the commission while the dog and pony show is busily getting saddled up. Dated February 6, 2018, addressed to Brent Bazelak, Conservation Agent, Raleigh Conservation Commission. Dear Mr. Bazelak and members of the commission, on behalf of the applicant, 420 Newburyport Turnpike LLC, Meridian Associates requests a waiver from the Town of Raleigh's Wetlands Protection Bylaw Fee worksheet for Section F, Commercial and Industrial Project, which amounts to $11,435. This request is made due to the fact that the proposed work is within an area that was previously disturbed and is currently an existing surface infiltration basin. Please feel free to contact us with any questions. Sincerely, Charles E. Weir, III, professional engineer, AP, President of Meridian Associates. For the commission's edification, that is not the full extent of the bylaw fee that was calculated for this project. The applicant has paid in regards to D, drainage, detention, retention basins, the amount of $420 plus $500 for a total of $920. So we're only talking on category F for commercial industrial projects, which states $500 for each building plus 50 cents per square foot of disturbance in a resource area as described by this bylaw. There is no building, but there is a disturbance that is within the 100-foot buffer zone of bordering vegetated wetland, which is a resource area under the bylaw. And that calculation is 22,870 square feet times 50 cents yielding the $11,435.
What I can do is show you, I don't know how many members of the commission are familiar with the site. Route 1 is out in here. This is New England Biolab's primary building, their headquarters. And as you drive in, this is that's the front door that you see. There's a paved area. This actually dates all the way back to when this was constructed in 1997. And then directly behind that paved area is this is all, it's a surface infiltration basin. Bottom of the basin is probably hard to see from where you are, is that yellow. That's the bottom of the basin. But the basin essentially takes up almost this whole area when you take all the off slopes, and there's basically a berm on this outside edge that creates that. This is an ideal place. Sandy's business is looking for places to, like as he said, to park some of the vehicles that he uses on the site, that he uses for his business purposes. And this is an ideal place for that to occur for him. We talked about the idea of this infiltration basin, of simply filling it in, putting a subsurface basin below it. Now what we're doing is we're taking the existing berm that's here, we're taking that existing berm and just continuing the grade on up and creating a flat area, putting the infiltration basin, the subsurface infiltration basin underneath that, and that replaces the surface, it fulfills the needs that the surface basin is providing. Provides actually a little bit more volume than what's in the surface basin, because we have a little bit of extra gravel in there. But we've provided drainage calculations that support all this. So that area that we're working in is all completely disturbed by the infiltration basin that exists today. So that's why we asked for the waiver, because we feel like we're working in an area, it's already disturbed. We're not cutting down any new trees. We're not cutting, in fact, we're not removing any trees.
You've already paid for that too, once. So.
That basin,
No, let me,
Okay.
let me follow up and I'll explain.
Sure.
that basin was constructed in 1998,
97, 98.
97, when the first building was
Oh,
built. He referred to that first building as being bioactive. It's acreage pay.
It's been
So if that
it's been a
helps you,
long day.
yeah, if that helps you orient
Yeah.
yourself.
So if I may,
Sure, I'd like to get this out of the way. Oh, sure.
So here is the record conditions plan. This is the first building and its associated stormwater management system that was constructed again at, we believe, 97 to 98. The town's wetlands bylaw was not in effect until January 2004. The site has a number of different buildings on it, so there's been a phased development. At some point in time, it was agreeable that the 25-foot no-cut, no-disturbance area would be extended and put around to surround the delineated bordering vegetated wetlands that is in this area, which is forested. So it had already been subject to development, which is why you see the contour lines of the slope of this stormwater basin going into what is now restricted 25-foot no-cut, no-disturbance area. Because it was originally disturbed, it was cleared, graded, and then filled to be the slope of the basin. So this was subject to prior development. It also was amenable to the property owner later on to impose 25-foot no-cut, no-disturbance area into that area which had not been subject to any restriction before, even though it was developed prior to the existence of the bylaw, which gave the commission the authority to impose those no-cut, no-disturbance areas. And also, I guess well, maybe I shouldn't go any more into the project. Maybe that, in a sense, gives you enough context for you to make a decision as to whether you believe there's some validity to their request, or whether you believe that they should pay the calculated bylaw fee for the disturbance they are requesting the commission to permit through this project.
Can I ask a question? You refer to the 25-foot no cut, no disturb. My understanding is that this area is not in the 25-foot.
What they are proposing for the project before you today, yes, does respect the 25-foot no cut, no disturb, and has been reconfigured since its initial submittal to respect the 25-foot no cut, no disturb. I'm just saying that no cut, no disturbance area was in the past subject to disturbance, and in fact was.
I understand.
Okay, yeah, so post-development, it was amenable to the property owner to extend
Right.
that restricted area to that.
Where does that drain?
It drains off to the left, and then down the property line. to the-
Actually, right here is,
Yeah.
here,
That's the outlet,
and it goes and outlets right down here.
But then
Part-
goes off to the left.
Yeah, it goes off to the left, goes to the south, and actually wraps around and goes into the Mill
To
River.
all
Goes into some
all
of our,
vegetated?
goes into
Oh,
some
it's
of
all
our
vegetated
conservation
wetland,
land.
yeah.
Yeah, well,
It
It
I
goes
know,
into our
I
conservation.
I gathered that, but it's all vegetated,
Yeah,
That's
Yeah.
correct.
yeah, it's all forest.
now, that would, without, you're not putting in any other basin.
No, what we're going to do is just put in infiltrators in the
Yeah.
bottom of the existing basin.
Yeah.
A little bit of excavation to be done, and then we're going to fill on top of it. That basin is what, 10, 15 feet below the parking lot level. So
Okay.
there's plenty of room to put the infiltrators in and then fill on top of it.
And those infiltrators are serviceable?
Yes.
Yep.
Part of this project, there is, I didn't want to get into the details of the project, but let me say this. As part of our site visit out there, it was identified that this discharge point is right, the edge, end of the outlet is right on the edge of delineated bordering vegetated wetlands. And part of this project will be to pull that back, based on the topography of the area. We see an opportunity to pull it back, rejuvenate the outflow area to make it more compliant with today's standards for stormwater discharge, and to put some breathing room between where that discharge water actually enters the vegetated wetlands. So there is a slight environmental improvement to existing infrastructure in regards to this project, if that helps the commission with this
In terms of
consideration.
precedents, we've had precedents before, right, where we waive fees where there's been pre-disturbed.
Yes, and
Previously-
actually to be quite honest with you, this is the best well-documented, as well as, you know, within our time period in terms of the history of the commission permitting this project. It's well known that there was development activity that occurred there, and it's extremely well documented just by the fact that you can see this detail and this level of specificity in this existing conditions plan. So it's clearly not, this project is not going into any area that wasn't already developed. And you could also, because to maintain basins, you mow them. You mow them, you keep the trees off of the berm, especially the top, and then going interior of the basin, because that actually destabilizes your earthen berm.
Not
So-
everybody mows them, but Sandy's done a great job. These are
Yeah,
very well.
again, when we were out there, it was imminently evident that he had not allowed a mangrove swamp to take hold in the bottom of his stormwater basins.
Anybody else?
Are we still on the
We're
fees?
I'm in the
still
fee,
on,
right,
yes,
fee.
yes, the commission needs to make a decision in regards to whether to.
Yeah, you can.
I'll move. That-
I'll second.
All in favor?
You're
Wait
moving
Wait
to
a
waive it,
second.
right?
I'll move that we waive it.
Yes.
I'll second that.
Since it's already disturbed, and I'm familiar with what this gentleman has done in the past, matter of fact, we've met several times on this parking lot project, but other things. He's an asset to the community, so I'm in favor. All in favor?
I would like to say one more thing. I would also like to point out that they have donated a substantial amount of property to the town on the backside of all of this property, and the fact that it fell outside of the jurisdiction of the commission in the first place, I'm in favor of it as well.
So is there an actual vote?
Yep.
Well, I don't know, yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm in favor.
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Okay, so waiving of the bylaw fee has been granted, so the fee tendered is deemed sufficient, and the meeting has, we have read the announcement, so
read the
the
announcement.
hearing will be open.
Given
you
most
take
of
it
my
back.
presentation,
Yes.
so I won't repeat myself. Like I said, it's, we're filling in that basin, we're placing a new structured basin, underground infiltration basin underneath it. The green is the wetlands, the BVW. The first red line is the 25-foot no disturb, and the second red line is the 100-foot buffer. The gray is existing pavement. We're trying to create this area as the laydown area, as I mentioned. As Brent was so good to discuss, and it's shown up there as well. The outlet is right at the edge of the wetlands. There's actually some riprap. Back in '97 when we designed this, we just did, it was predated what we call level spreaders. And all that was there is just riprap at the outlet. So our intention, the notes it calls it out, the intention is to pull it back about 15 feet. The grade is sufficient. In fact, you can see the earth is mounded over the pipe, so it'll be readily be able to be done with very, very little earthwork. We can pull that pipe back and create the level spreader, which is, and we'll actually use the stone. Some of the stone, we'll have to bring some more in, but we'll use some of the stone that is the riprap outlet now to build that level spreader with. So we'll actually pull some materials out of the wetlands and pull back from the wetlands. I'd say we'll be about 7 or 8 feet probably from the wetland. And then that little bit of area that's disturbed right at the side of the wetlands, we'll plant that with a New England wetland seed mix.
Are you putting just stone on that, or are you gonna put the new permeable cement?
We were going to use just the riprap stone, just this probably 6-inch trap stone. So what's it, permeable cement?
I've seen it, I haven't known anybody around here that's done it, but water goes through it just like.
Well, this, yeah, I mean, that stone is just resting on the ground just to keep the, it does two things. Number one, the level spreader is like a little spoon-shaped, stone area. When the water flows into it, protects any erosion from occurring, but it also spreads the water out so that once it flows out of it, that it's spread out, so it's not a point source anymore. Pretty standard stuff for the Mass DEP stormwater regulations.
And the velocity's down too.
Yeah.
It knocks the velocity down, it spreads the water out. We have provided, in fact, it's in my bag, we've got a stormwater report we provided to you. I think it's a couple inches thick, and we've also provided a narrative on how we meet all the requirements in the Mass DEP stormwater management regulations. And I won't bore you with going through those, but we meet all the infiltration requirements and treatment requirements. And we're really just replacing the existing surface basin with a subsurface basin. So it's not a terribly complicated project.
That's all gravel, right?
That's correct.
And the pavement stays the same? There's no
That's correct.
expansion
It's
or
probably
anything?
worth noting too, the gravel, what we're doing with the gravel is we're directing the gravel back towards, there's actually catch basins in the existing yard now. So that gravel will drain back into the catch basins, get a little bit of treatment before it then is directed into the infiltration basin. So that gravel won't be directed down into the wetlands. It'll come back towards the pavement, and you get the treatment. Even though it's gravel, it'll probably get pretty compacted with machinery going over it. So we've kind of treated it as an impervious surface and given it the treatment that it needs.
Do you have anything to add?
No, pretty much we kind of talked about everything. Like I said, there's a little bit of environmental restoration going on here. There's an upgrading of the facility to be closer to compliance with current stormwater standards in terms of the discharge point. Infiltration of the area, slope, as Mr. Weir just discussed, is all appropriate to take advantage and not shed any water towards the forested wetland area that is undeveloped. And therefore, if the commission, now did we find out anything about the lack of a file number? Because we do not have a file number issued.
I haven't heard any more on that. No, I looked it up online. I saw the same thing you did today. So
we haven't received a file number, which causes us not to be able to to issue an order. The commission could choose to close and vote to issue, contingent upon the issuance of a file number and any commentary from DEP, if there is any, that it be appropriately addressed, and therefore the hearing would only officially close upon kind of a clean bill of health coming from DEP. At this point in time, the submittals and the quality of the information that this office has received leads me to recommend to the commission consideration the issuance of an order for a typical commercial project. The slight activity that is occurring in the no cut, no disturbance zone will be conditioned to, upon a full restoration of vegetated cover, that will return to being restricted no cut, no disturbance area, as well as the bordering vegetated wetlands to be in an undisturbed state for finalization of the project.
All right, I have no problem with that. Do anybody?
I will so move that with all of the circumstances described by Brett.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you, Cindy.
Greatly appreciate the commission's time.
Congratulations on it.
Thank you.
It's been a while since you didn't.
Yeah. Take care.
See you again soon.
Tracy, you've done about everything out there, haven't you?
We got a few more things up our sleeve. Thanks again.
Yep.
Good night.
There we go.
Hi, could you folks please come in? There's chairs on these sides that have been emptied out and are available. If there's anyone who hasn't signed in, could you please circulate that? To some of the new folks.
Returning masses. Thank you.
You want me to read right from,
Yes, and I think,
combine them?
and I think we might as well open both of them.
Do you want me to read both
Yeah.
individually? Okay, I'm gonna read both items. It's one item. It's two separate ones. One is the stormwater,
Yes.
and one's the original notice of intent. What we have here for 8/15 is the continued notice of intent for application DEP number 63-0669 at land off Weathersfield Street, map 11, parcels 54, 54-1, 58, 599, 607, 615, 623 Weathersfield Street, map 11, parcel lots 56, Raleigh Solar LLC, owner Marvin Revocable Trust, proposed construction of an 11.25 acre solar photovoltaic system, gravel access drive, stormwater facilities associated with grading within the 100-foot buffer zone of bordering vegetated wetlands and isolated wetlands. Now, the next item, which we're gonna run concurrently, is a continued storm water permit, application SMP number 30-2017, land off Weathersfield Street, map 11, parcels 54, 54-1, 58, 599, 607, 615, 623 Weathersfield Street, map 11, parcels lot 53, 58, 58-2, 58-2A, land off Pine Needle Lane, Georgetown, map 11, parcel lot 56, Raleigh Solar LLC, owner Marvin Revocable Trust, proposed construction of 11.25 acre solar photovoltaic system, gravel access drive, stormwater facilities associated with grading, possibly within 100-foot bordering vegetated wetland, total site disturbance approximately 491,000 square feet, and a slope disturbance of 60,000 square feet at greater than 15%.
That's it. Mr. Chairman, for the commission's information, the applicant who is here tonight has also submitted $15,085, which as of their recalculated bylaw fee worksheet dated January 30th was the balance owed the commission. I will understand that could change because there's the possibility of changes to the project, but no project changes, no information was submitted for the commission's review or the office review for tonight's meeting.
All right, would you like to have anything to say?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bonnie Berkowitz, representing Raleigh Solar. We're here this evening, our engineers, prior to the planning board meeting, I believe it was last week, received some correspondence from Mr. Graham later in the afternoon, and we continued with the planning board meeting. And our engineer, our expert, isn't here this evening. We're continuing to work with the plan and anticipate further material to be submitted both to Conservation Commission and to the Planning Board. So at this time, we'd like to request a continuance of the meetings and provide an opportunity to send the material to Mr. Bazelak and to Mr. Baker.
Yes, thank you, because we would need to have received that, and obviously have yet, so there's not much we can do. So, if you want, we'll put you on the March 6, 2018,
That would be fine, thank you.
okay?
Do we have
Do I have a,
a joint motion to continue both the notice of intent and
So
stormwater
moved.
management?
so moved, second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, appreciate your time.
Very much.
Thanks for coming to visit.
Everyone's so nice there.
So all the folks that were here for Raleigh Solar tonight, the applicant and their professional consultants had not submitted anything for the commission's consideration at tonight's meeting. They did tender the balance that was due based on the recalculation of the wetlands bylaw fee, based on the last submitted plans that had shown a realignment of their solar fields. So
The
that,
check isn't binding though, as it relates to that.
I'm sorry?
The check doesn't create anything that's binding, correct?
no, it's an application fee. Whether the commission grants a permit or denies a permit, end result, that fee is not connected to that.
Is it refundable, sir, if it's denied?
No, it is not.
It's not.
No, it is not.
And it may change again, this is based on,
The last
last
configuration that was presented to the commission, which was prior to their meeting before the planning board, where they received some feedback, which they apparently are reacting to.
yes,
Tammy Graves, 624 Weathersfield Street. I just had a quick question. I noticed that on the agenda for January 30th of the meeting, the acreage was 4.43, whatever, and with a disturbance of 200,000. And tonight I noticed that the acreage has gone from 4 to 11.25 with a disturbance of 491,000.
that's what the check is for, yeah.
Yeah.
It's changed every
Are
time.
you freaking kidding me? I mean,
We got no, I have,
Well,
so,
first off, ma'am, we've continued that hearing, so we cannot discuss or deliberate. We can tell you that based on the record, based on the information they submitted to us, they revised their original submitted application. They gave us new plans, and we also requested that they give us revised calculations because it seemed obvious to us that the size had changed. And so they submitted that information to us, which we now entered into the record, and you now see reflected in what we announce and how we continue the meeting. We're giving you the most current information that we have that describes the characteristics of this project.
It's totally amazing.
Well, for my own edification, I assume the acreage talked about here is the total disturbed acreage and not necessarily the size of the solar facility, which was originally shown on our agenda as of roughly 4 acres. So I assume that's not being expanded just to 11 acres.
Going from 4 acres to 11 acres is an expansion, and that's what they told us they were doing.
But it's not clear to me that that's solar panel acreage. It's disturbed.
Well, we don't regulate solar panels, we regulate the disturbance.
I understand, but she's upset about the possibility of
So
doubling the
is
size.
this actual or factual?
We can't tell you because we don't have plans.
Have you heard
So
from the town
basically,
engineer?
we all came here tonight to be told that we can't talk about anything because they
Don't have anything to talk
don't have
about.
anything to say.
They haven't given us anything, we can't say yay or nay
So
or
I
what.
can't ask a question like, what happens at nighttime during a solar farm? Are there lights everywhere that are gonna be present? I mean, I can't talk about things like that or ask questions like that.
You can ask the question, but we're not gonna answer it respectfully because we are not deliberating the project, and quite frankly, lights is not something that our wetlands bylaw or the state wetlands law specifically regulates. So I would respectfully tell you that you may ask your question,
No, that's
but
fine.
unfortunately, we are not
We're in the dark.
into the light, we're not into the light business.
You know what is simply amazing about this whole thing was last night at the selectmen's meeting, when we all were there and present and discussed all this, and then they said, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming. We appreciate your comments, and we get up and leave. This individual was allowed to continue talking for 10 and 15 minutes with nobody else in the room.
With
Really?
all due respect, this is the Conservation
politics.
Commission.
I know.
Honestly am not in supervisory capacity of the Board of Selectmen, and we try to run our meetings as respectfully and professionally as we can.
Can you answer me this? Under state law, there's usually a time limit. If no one makes a decision, the planning board, is there anything on that? If no one makes a decision, I'm talking planning board and commission here.
With our
there is-
process, we have permission. The applicant requested a continuance. They gave us permission to continue their hearing process on the 2 applications, and we responded to that and voted to continue to March 6th.
But someone will make a decision eventually.
We have
You
had,
have to by law. If you don't, it goes forward from what
No.
I read.
No, there's no de facto approval,
No.
not on the wetlands, no. Now, you may be talking planning board stuff, which I cannot talk to you about because I'm not educated about that. But under environmental regulations, the Wetlands Protection Act and our Town of Raleigh's wetlands bylaw, the commission is gonna have to reach a decision at some point in time. If the applicant at some point chooses not to give us a decision, permission to continue, and yet the commission feels that there's information that they need or whatever, then we might be forced into the fact that we do have to render a decision within 21 days, which is why our meetings are 21 days apart.
But I think the acreage has gone from 7,
Yes, it was
4, now 11.
We discovered the acreage was fluctuating and they weren't giving us revised sheets that had that calculation on it, so we attempted to correct that so that we could correct what we announced and what we posted for this application process, so that you folks would have the most current information that they provided to us. But we're totally subject to what they provide to us.
I think for clarity, they saw it before. Do you want to talk about the idea of why with the application fee and us not being able to open it until the application fee is paid? Do you want to, so they understand why that happened?
Well, again, they forthrightly paid the fee upon being informed that there was a deficit in what had been originally provided, so that our hearing process could continue.
Exactly.
So they're paying a fee to continue the hearing, is that what
No,
I'm understanding?
no. The size of the project had changed. The size and square footage of their disturbance of wetland resource areas changed. Our bylaw fee has a structure where your square footage disturbance of regulated resource areas results in you being assessed a fee. They had changed things, so they had to redo the calculations and showed that they now owed the commission under that fee structure some more monies, and so they submitted that. They didn't pay for the continuance. The commission could have decided not to grant the continuance, but there was no foundation for that. We had nothing entered into the record to allow us to do
So
that.
they're paying for more disturbance.
Because their project changed.
Up to
It's gone from
11.25 acres.
11.25 acres.
Well,
We don't know that because we've only.
the 11.2.5 acres is not wetland resource area, don't confuse that.
But it is the size of the project.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
That is what she's
for the
asking. So you're going
stormwater-
around
for
her
the s-
question by answering in a manner of saying this is wetland, but her question was the size of the project,
Ma'am,
correct?
with all due respect, we have two applications before us. We have a stormwater management application, which does deal with the overall size of the whole project. And then we have a notice of intent application under the Wetlands Act and the Wetlands Bylaw. So there are two different parameters, two different regulated areas that the commission has to deal with. We're not trying to go around anything. We're trying to express to you that we have two applications which have two sets of criteria. So we're sorry if that's confusing. We're not.
That's not confusing, sir.
We're trying to explain it as succinctly as we can.
Yes, I believe that her question was, or her statement therefore was, that the acreage of the project went from 4.8 acres to 11.25.
Yes.
Thank you.
According
Which
to what
also
this submitted
increased
to
the
us.
disturbance.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Well, how much are you allowed to disturb?
Whatever.
If you own the property, then,
You can disturb the whole thing.
or if you
So
get
if
permission,
you
I
own the
mean,
property, you can disturb as much as you want as long as you pay for it. Am I understanding that correct?
Well, not
I'm
No.
really. You know, provided you stay away from the 100-foot bordering
You gotta stay
vegetated
away from
wetland.
And most of their home will be towards Georgetown.
What's the sequence as it relates to, so the planning board has to make a decision, the conservation commission, do you make a decision as well? And is one dependent on the other, or do they run in parallel tracks?
I'm not sure how the
They-
planning board
well,
does it. but-
so they've submitted either a application or, I'm sorry, I'm really not an expert on the planning board process. There may be two concurrent
But is the-
applications with them also, but the planning board process is not linked and not subject to our process.
Okay, so the two
When-
independent processes.
Well, when projects have stormwater management infrastructure, both boards look at that. The planning board has on retainer an independent engineering firm to review stormwater calculations. So we just kind of piggyback on the planning board, who has a professional to do an independent review. We take advantage of that. If we wish to, the commission could exercise its authority and require a totally different independent engineer to consult with for the Conservation Commission specifically, but that seems to be a needless redundancy that could result in confusion when one independent professional for another town board is doing the same type of analysis.
So from a timing perspective, the next meeting from the Conservation Commission is going to be March 6th.
Yes.
March 14th is the planning board meeting, when this will be on the agenda as well. So am I accurate in saying that the Conservation Commission will have to have another meeting post March 6th before they can make a decision? Because
Well,
we
you're-
need to get that study done by the planning board's
Well, you're
contracted individual.
You're presupposing, we don't know how soon either board might receive a comprehensive package. And that, once that comprehensive package comes in, the planning board is then going to get it to their independent consultant. Their independent consultant may be able to review it and render an opinion about stormwater prior to the commission's meeting, or he may not.
So the trigger isn't the meeting itself, you would assume that the
But
proposal will be submitted prior.
But that piece of information is a critical component to our deliberations, because we want to make absolutely sure that whatever they do that causes stormwater, that the negative effects of stormwater are mitigated and designed for and taken care of on their property, and not shunted off to any abutting properties or shunted into the street or something like that.
That was my question, is commission, you being in charge of conservation. So now that they have changed that, and you will eventually get a piece of paper that says exactly what their changes are, do you then go out there again to again make a study and make sure that they're not going into an area that will affect the environment in a negative way, or will affect, the areas? So you don't understand what I'm saying, that if it changes, it's always possible that there's an area in a corner that someone's not thinking about, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God.
Brent just found several of those.
Because that would be my concern with their
Yeah.
changes, okay? Now, what might they now be disturbing that we weren't gonna disturb before?
Well, we can't know until they
And I-
tell us.
and
Till you get the, but then you must have to be allowed time to do that.
That's why we were unable to
Because-
meet tonight.
I mean, why have your board if you don't have that power to say,
Well,
we need to
we're
go do
busy
this?
tonight with other things
Right.
also, so we
Yeah.
have our meeting.
But that's what I was wondering,
There's
your
a-
responsibility.
There was a little difference here. Now, this particular applicant they chose to submit an application to us prior to us seeing any of this construction activity. They submitted an application that was solely for the purpose of my presence representing the commission, just looking at the wetlands delineation, looking and see where the edge of the bordering vegetated wetland was. And they submitted it in such a manner that it was a fairly significant piece of their property. So I've covered a lot of the square footage of the edge of wetlands on their property. But in answer to your specific question, yes, as they change configuration on this project, if there's an area that I feel I need to revisit because they now have moved over and they're now proposing to do something where they weren't proposing, I do revisit the property. And I have revisited the property. And I anticipate in this next change, if it's what I think it's going to be, I will be going out onto the property again.
So does the planning board therefore have to give you enough time for you to complete your study versus
No,
having a
this
certain
is-
date?
This is just the Conservation Commission,
Conservation.
so this is,
But what if your
This is separate.
decision on the effect of wetlands affects what the planning board needs to make a final decision? I mean, are we working
you-
with or against the law? I mean, there's a couple issues here.
You can have a conflict between the two approvals. Say we approve something that says, okay, you can do such and such according to conservation wetlands law. But the planning board says, no, you can't do it.
For other reasons.
for other reasons,
They have to
yes,
have
under their
both-
jurisdiction. Yeah.
They have to have both approvals to do their final thing. And
Approval
it's-
of your board and the planning board, is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
but it doesn't have to be, it would not have to be exactly the same, because if they were doing something outside the area of wetlands that we did not have control over, if they changed that with the planning board, we don't have a say on it. We control, I shouldn't say we control.
We have oversight
We have
over-
oversight of the, right, exactly, over the wetlands. Okay, in conjunction with people in Boston, because Boston can overrule our decisions.
So that'd be the DEP,
DEP,
can overrule us.
right. But
Well, what chance do
the
we have?
two are separate.
You had a question?
Yes, so I hear you speaking of wetlands and how you watch over that, and then the talk about the stormwater drain runoff. I came across something from the DEP that, and it kind of, hearing that they've increased their footprint, it's the habitat of potential regional or statewide importance, and it involves wildlife. Is that something the DEP would look at, or is that something that the Conservation Commission would also take into consideration?
That's something that we looked at, and we looked at that when they first applied, just for the commission to look at the wetlands boundaries. No, not for any construction activity at all. Because under our bylaw, that is a bylaw protectable resource area also, not just an area that's subject to regulation for those.
Because it appears to be in that footprint.
Well,
somewhat.
it may appear to be, but it isn't, because we specifically assessed the property. Based on the current, there's been, I think the latest map that was issued was
2011?
2017.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But that was when it was 4 acres, now it's 2.5 times.
No. Again, there wasn't any disturbance at all
Okay,
proposed.
okay.
We were just looking at wetland resource areas and the habitats of rare threatened or estimated habitats of rare or threatened wildlife is a bylaw regulated wetland resource area that we looked at specifically when we were just looking at the boundary of the vegetated wetlands and the isolated wetlands that's on the property, so.
Do you also look at groundwater, land?
Well, were you at the meeting when I told you that the expression of vegetated wetlands is the fact that groundwater is readily available at or near the surface? And so, in a sense, the plants are used as the canary in the mine, so to speak. The plant community that likes wetlands and is identified as being in what they call hydric soils or wet saturated soils is the indicator to us that there is groundwater there and near the surface within
surface water,
12
which
or
I
16 inches. Yeah. So do we look at groundwater? Well, we do, but because the plants are there that say, hey, this is a real nice place for us to live because our roots are wet all the time.
Who makes the decision, like, the abutters? I mean, can they, like, revise it? I mean, like, you look out their back door, it's gonna be all solar panels, so who makes that decision? I
Not
mean,
conservation.
Well, the applicant proposes what their engineers put together for a configuration to us to look at. We may have issues depending upon where they propose thing. Well, not only if it's in a regulated wetland resource area. If it's not in a regulated wetland resource area, we honestly have no say
So you have no
about
say
it.
on aesthetics, basically, that's what it is.
Yes,
That's a fair statement.
What if it is? And what if they give you this information the night before the planning board? Are you given the adequate opportunity to?
We do not, we were given stuff tonight on the Mahaffey, so we're gonna take this home and read this before our next meeting. So that's what we do, we would not make a decision.
Commission always has the ability to request a continuance because
That's
they
what I
don't
wanna
feel
know.
they've had an adequate amount of time to appropriately vet what's been submitted to them. So,
Do a thorough
yes,
search, okay.
yeah.
Now, if a new plan is submitted prior to March 6th, will that be available for review for the abutters? And I got a second question, is the 11.25 acre plan, has that been disseminated?
Have you folks put together like a phone tree or anything? Do you have a phone tree or something?
No, it's,
We got Matt.
just few of them, so we know when to show, when to show up.
Why don't you,
That's a good idea.
if you don't mind my making a suggestion, why don't you make a little phone tree? You know, so you've got a couple folks that would be like your primary contacts. I would love to have you then submit your information to me, like an email address and a phone number, and I can inform you when something is submitted to the office, and then you can spread that information around. Now, lots of times what they submit to me are fairly large electronic files. We do ask for things to be submitted to us in electronic version, like I've been displaying some of the plans and stuff here tonight. So I can either make an attempt to email those to some of your contact people, or yes, there is usually always at least one hard copy in the office that can be looked at. But that would be my suggestion, because in all honesty, you know, until they show up at the door and present that, I don't know, but I would be more than happy to inform you when we did have something.
That's a great
Yes.
suggestion.
If, instead of sending it to one person to send out to a few other people, can it not be posted on your website for the entire town to be able to review?
Why
Because it is
should
a
we
public
be
document.
against the rest of the town?
I'm sorry?
Why would we wanna be against the rest of the town?
No, she's talking about posting the application, the plan materials or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, because if you're gonna send it to him and then who would send it out to the tree, would it not make more sense to post it onto your website so that, because it is a
You know,
public document?
Let me look into that. To be quite honest with you, our website is not a content management base that allows me to make direct responsive
changes to it. Now, that doesn't mean that that can't happen and won't happen in the future, but at this point in time, there's. Pardon me?
Very diplomatic.
So, but I would certainly be glad to find out whether the size of the files would lend themselves to that being done. It's not, I'm not dealing with a robust, responsive, flexible website. And that, not saying anything bad, I'm just saying that I will certainly investigate that and see if I can't do that to assist you folks. But I was suggesting the phone tree thing as possibly a means, because again, we don't know. They could have showed up here tonight and brought plans in and given us to them right on the spot, so maybe there would have been something to show you. We honestly don't know until they come and show up for this meeting as to what is really going to occur. But we'd certainly like to be able to inform you as soon as we do receive something.
A bigger comment, many times we do have the plans ahead of time.
Yeah.
And that allows us to make good decisions.
Informed decisions.
Okay, when we don't, you're gonna see continuances, because we're not gonna make a decision. Because we have, our job is to make sure that we adhere to.
Because, like,
These
say for
protection
instance, like back in the day when this first started, the abutters were given certified letters, back when it was this little teeny thing that nobody had to worry about. And then as it got a little bigger, so we received another certified
Well,
letter.
actually, it started off at 7, then went smaller.
Yeah.
And then now it's
So,
apparently
but-
gone bigger again.
But the different times that it changed, we would receive a certified letter saying that, oh, by the way, this is gonna look like this now, and this is back when it was gonna be on Brook Street, and then all of a sudden the access road's not gonna be on Weathersfield Street. Like, we got certified letters every time there was a significant change like that.
From who?
From,
May have been the plan,
Yeah.
may
Is
have
that
been the
planning
planning
board?
board.
Who?
the architect, they're saying.
The engineer, okay, yep.
Engineer, whatever. So with like, I guess, but we won't receive an updated one of those for the 11.25, I guess.
Well, we don't send them out. But we'll gladly show you any information, should we even get it.
Consistent with the need for our agent to have time to review these documents himself. So if he's only got one copy, it may not be viewable immediately by some people.
All right?
Thank you. All right, everybody needs to come back on March the 6th, at what time?
And that would be, well,
We haven't set that
We haven't
yet.
set
haven't set that.
All right, March the 6th, people, we don't know the time.
Either way.
You will be notified.
Thanks very much.
And everybody needs to write down their email address on this piece of paper if they want to be notified of this craziness.
Good luck. Yep.
What's rolling too? As the engineer goes.
Well, I would think you'd go to the selectmen.
We have, twice.
This must be a little different for you guys,
Well, it is, yeah, it's been a while since a particular application seemed to engender so much interest from the neighborhood. But then again, what they're proposing is kind of understandable.
I don't know how they get that. And we can't tell how he got it because they're on the plan.
I'm sorry?
Like, that 11.25. I mean, are they changing the kilowatts?
They are. They
Yeah.
had to go to 2, make it work economically. They're now up to 2, whatever, kilowatts.
But are you saying that based upon something you've learned between?
The planning board meeting, they had
Then they went
actually a
to
solar
selectmen last
engineer
night.
at the planning board meeting who discussed and was giving a rationalization for the expansion of what appeared to be the panels, at least when I watched the video. I wasn't in attendance.
So, they mentioned something about Georgetown. Is Georgetown now involved in this too, or is it just because of the land abuts their line?
Yeah. Land, I think they got some land that's in Georgetown that I've read off.
Georgetown's gotta go through all this as well.
Well, no, they're not proposing to do
If they're gonna do work on that.
I'm not aware that they have filed any type of application in Georgetown, because all we have seen on the plans is that they are staying within the confines
So
of Raleigh.
technically, the abutters in Georgetown may not even be aware that this is going on.
Well, it may not be abutting them.
It depends on the location of the wetlands on the property in Raleigh. If it's within 100 feet of Georgetown, then Georgetown Conservation Commission would have jurisdiction, and they should be doing something about it.
Yeah, but I'm not sure.
I'm just really curious, because I've been really involved in Raleigh. I've been involved with the police and the safety program. I've really done a lot in 30 years. Now I'm just starting to hear this political side a little bit more. I had some involvement when they first destroyed my road. How much, as your commission, when you deal with the groundwater, when you deal with species, when you deal with disturbance of an area that may cause disturbance in other areas, how much power do you have? If you, let's just say, very seriously, let's just say you found this rodent that someone thought was, extinct, and and here it was on this land. What do you do then?
That would shut it right down.
Say what?
That would, if we don't approve it, accept it, it doesn't go. I'm truly finding this, really fascinating and interesting.
We have cease and desist powers that we can use.
Well, but specifically for rare, threatened, and endangered species or whatever, they have to file with the state's Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program. That then becomes part of one of the aspects. So in a sense, their application to us then branches out by the fact that that application has to go to that state agency division or whatever for review and for their commentary on it, which may cause that department to say, sorry, you can't, in this area, you cannot do any development disturbance activity. I mean, this is all speculation or whatever, but that does cause, in a sense, a branching, and they are required then to send their application to this specific state agency that reviews those things and has biologists and stuff, and is more adept at figuring.
But you're that beginning stage, and it seems to me that you have quite a bit of responsibility when going over this. I mean, it doesn't.
Well, again, the first part of this process, when they asked us,
Feet of a bordering vegetated wetland, yeah.
the first part of this process was for us to look at, there's a published map that shows areas that are thought to have or have had observances of various things. And none of those sensitive areas were found to be on the parcels that they had.
Right, yeah, there was a young kid here a couple weeks ago, and he talked about the spotted salamander.
Yeah, except he was talking about yellow spotted salamanders,
Correct,
and those
which is
mole
not-
salamanders
right,
are like
correct,
all over the place
yeah.
and not.
But what I did say to him, he was young,
Yeah.
and what I said to him was, if you feel that's true, then you need to follow through with this. You need to find out where there's information about it. I said, that's how the process goes. You need to have proof.
And that mapping is done by historical observances, or in fact, they've even weeded it down now where some observances, if they haven't been re-observed within the last 30 years, then they change and they stop mapping the area. So that's actually triggered on someone having seen
Right.
the particular species in question, so the fact that they're not seen is not necessarily a guarantee that they're not there.
Right. Well, that's why I put him to task. I said, okay, if you're gonna say that, you're young, you can go find out some more information. Well, I will miss the next meeting, which I'm sorry, I'll be in Ohio visiting my daughter, but I do find this fascinating, and I do feel that you are trying to do your job as best as you can. I think this is a bad situation, but, all right. Thank you.
I have one quick question. Somebody mentioned the Georgetown Commission. Have they been involved with this, or should they be involved with this?
You got to ask them.
You'd have to ask them.
That's up to their.
We have not been presented with anything that shows the construction disturbance of this project going across our municipal boundary into Georgetown. So that doesn't mean that if they own property in Georgetown and they propose something that doesn't come over and link into this, that, I mean, I don't know. Your best bet would be to call the Georgetown Conservation Office and ask them whether these folks, whether they've received an application from Raleigh Solar LLC or Bonnie Berkowitz, or Maven Revocable Trust, I'm sorry, it's the property owner.
So if they haven't received anything, they may not even want to deal with this at all.
Well, again, you have to propose something in that municipality for it to be subject to their jurisdiction.
Okay, all right, great, thank you.
Because there's isolated wetlands as well as bordering vegetated wetlands.
This is saying it's graded isolation vegetated wetlands.
At one point in time, there was. I've got to revisit whatever they changed and see where they are.
You don't know what it is now.
Yeah, again, because I haven't seen the new configuration, I don't know.
All right, would you like me to read this next?
Sure.
All right, that's gonna bring us to our 8:45 item. It's a enforcement order for subdivision roadway 239 Main Street, map 26, parcel 26, lot 4, Michael Sabatini. Want me to read anything here?
No, Mr. Chairman, give me just a moment. So on or about on or about January 16th, informed that there was the depositing of gravel and also some reprocessed asphalt over on what is sometimes referred to as the driveway to Bradstreet Farm, or I think Elmwood Lane. Some things identify it. Apparently a lot of the historic farm driveways somehow got some names indicating they might have been public ways, but I don't believe this is a public way. And further investigation and discussions with folks revealed that Mr. Sabatini had deposited material. The material we're looking at here, there's forested bordering vegetated wetlands and actually a ditch that conducts water that goes underneath the drive. Which is, I think, shown right about here, where some of this gravel material was deposited along the shoulder without the benefit of any erosion control and within the jurisdictional area of the commission, without the benefit of any type of application being tendered to the commission prior to the material being deposited. And so, so both a notice of violation was issued to Mr. Michael Sabatini in regards to failure to implement the erosion control under the Stormwater Management and Erosion Control Bylaw. He was requested to contact the office to schedule a visit and to immediately install erosion control devices to control the deposited fill materials and prevent transport to abutting properties into resource areas. Also simultaneously, on the 24th, issued an enforcement order under the Wetlands Protection Act and the Town of Raleigh's Wetlands Bylaw for depositing of fill, gravel, and reprocessed asphalt pavement millings, approximately 1,000 square feet within the 100-foot buffer zone for bordering vegetated wetlands, under 310 CMR 10.02, failure to use erosion controls to contain and control unconsolidated sediments, unstabilized gravels at the road culvert crossing, and within 1 foot of bordering vegetated wetlands on slope terrain. And so Mr. Sabatini did contact the office almost immediately in regards to receiving the communication, although I think the weekend was in the way. And I met him out on the property, and we immediately identified areas that needed erosion control, so I'm going to switch. I hadn't heard from Mr. Sabatini in regards to the completion of deployment of the erosion control, but I stopped by here today and saw that there had been installation of
February 6th.
Yeah. I just hadn't heard from you that it had been finalized, and normally in order to secure the filter sock so that it doesn't move and start going down the slope itself, there's recommended staking, which I think the materials I had given you, so hopefully that was going to be looked into in the near future to secure that and keep that from possibly sliding any further if there's any pressure.
Yes, when you and I talked, I called Michael immediately in the MBK, and he was in Florida. When he got back, he hustled in that Tuesday to beat the storm that was coming on Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday we had that bad storm.
So we hustled it up and got the whole thing installed before the snow hit.
Yeah.
And did not get a chance to get the stakes in before that snow on that.
But I didn't see any signs that anything had gotten past the
Right.
sock.
And it was more important to get the socks in before the snow came.
Right. Well, the rain,
Yeah.
because that's exactly what we wanted to guard against, was it washing any of that material, especially as it thawed out. So that's the present status of the site. There was a recommendation within the issuance of this enforcement order for consideration of a notice of intent application. But I'm glad that Mr. Sabatini is here tonight because we can discuss, because there was a plan that was submitted to the office. And I don't know how much of that plan you're intending to implement, and that could have a bearing on what type of application is appropriate. So, and also, we had requested, and I didn't know if you were bringing with you tonight, the enforcement order had requested that you submit a written statement of your intent to comply with the enforcement order. I had mentioned that to you when you came into the office. Did you get an opportunity to author or pen such a note?
I sort of did, going forward, I sort of have a sense of what I think should be done, but, which is what one of the things that you and I talked about.
Right.
When you suggested, to put the duff at the bottom between the bottom edge and the silt sock into luminova.
Yeah. Well, okay, but that would be your project.
Right.
But I'm just saying, as a matter of course, your presence here tonight does basically state that,
Okay.
that you're demonstrating a willingness. We just usually ask to have to try and get a written confirmation.
Well,
Sometimes that can come in prior to the meeting so that we know how things are gonna.
I had a little statement in my little statement going forward. I basically wrote down the things that you mentioned about the things that we talked, which is to break it a little bit more compact, a little better, and put some lumen and seed down. Those are the
So
things
maybe
going
what-
forward.
I think.
I wrote that I would like to fine tune the gravel and complete the compact.
So here's, I'm gonna display, if you don't mind, may I display the plan?
Yep.
And this is kind of the plan that you were basing some of your activities on, right?
Yes.
Let me just rotate that because it's not too readable right at the moment. Maybe. I'm just kind of focusing down on the section of the plan that shows the forested bordering vegetated wetlands and the wetlands in that ditch, and then the 100-foot buffer zone that is around there. I understand that there's other parts of the gravel drive that you're working on. So are you intending to, now this plan, which I think Mr. Weir is with us tonight, is Mr. Weir
Yes.
representing you?
He's here tonight.
Is he
So-
representing you, or is he just in attendance?
He's in attendance. I'll jump on him. He'll help if
He pays me that.
if there's a question I can't answer, some technical question. But we're not gonna be doing the things that are related to the culvert or building.
Okay, or
concrete
this Y,
walls.
or this Y and any
Correct.
of that, or expansion of the pavement. So basically, you're just putting gravel shoulders
We'll put it in.
on it,
Right.
and then you're gonna loam and seed those shoulders to
Exactly.
stabilize them. Is there any thought to anything at the culvert crossing? Are you gonna put in any type of post or something to keep someone from driving off there,
Yes,
or?
actually, Arthur can lend, I brought that to Arthur's attention about the safety issue, and he's already, if I can say this, and I brought
Pat.
the DPW down.
Pat said that he would look into it, and Pat has mentioned it to the selectmen. Pat has been shorthanded this winter.
Okay.
So he
But
said
that's
he'd
not
be
necessarily a component of your project?
Correct.
Okay.
That's gonna be the town that's gonna handle that.
But we thought it was
And he
important to
wants
bring
to
to your attention and to bring to Arthur's attention
Okay.
as a concern of a safety issue, so I did address it to the DPW and to Arthur.
Can I ask a very basic question?
Mm-hmm.
That road, who owns it?
It's a driveway and it's owned by the town of Raleigh.
So it's a driveway owned by the town of Raleigh?
Yes, and I have a
And
resolution.
you have the right to
His
get.
property was bought by the town, and then he
He
bought
bought
the
it back.
building.
But the town
But-
does own, it. Right now, that road
Yes,
is
the
owned.
town owns it, but Mr.
Has it
Sabatini not only has, correct me if I misstate anything, not only do you have the right to pass and repass, but you also have the right to maintain
Yes, sir.
the driveway. And that includes basically what's going on
Thank you.
right
I mean,
now.
I just,
So he does not,
clarity.
so unlike someone else that would come onto town property, he's already got a legal right
Right, to do that.
to
Thank
be
you.
doing this work. He doesn't have to go to the, say, town administrator or the selectman and say, I'm wishing to put this gravel down here, would you please sign off on my application that I've got permission? He doesn't.
Just wanted clarity.
He's got the right with his ownership of the property that this accesses.
Okay.
So is there anything else beyond the gravel, loam, seeding it to get vegetative cover and stabilize it? Is there anything else, any other component of your project?
Yes, down, further down, remember those big divots? You and I talked about.
Right,
putting-
right, along the side.
Putting duff in to try to make vastly irregular contours in the existing soil look more natural. You and I talked.
So just sort of grade
Yeah.
and smooth off the toe of slope
Right,
on there.
especially going going towards my house on that right-hand side, with
Right.
those big holes.
Yeah, I mean, that could possibly be here or a little further up, we didn't actually specifically.
There was just some big holes.
So again, I'm trying to advise both you and the commission as to what type of application, because it sounds to me like this isn't a notice of intent application. It sounds to me like if this is all it is, that the commission may wish to allow him just to do a request to determine applicability, and receive a determination that has conditions, that conditions the use of erosion control, as we've already started to do, and then the loaming and seeding, and to establish thick vegetative cover and have it inspected before the erosion control can be removed. I mean, it sounds to me that that's really
Right, we're just
the only component to this proposed project.
fixing it after it's done.
Right, right, obtaining,
Right.
well, but he hasn't, we all acknowledge the fact that it's not in the finished state, it's in an unfinished state, it's not stable at the moment. We've got the erosion control there, so that helps stop any issues of it slumping or flowing and causing detriment and harm to the buffer zone or the vegetated wetlands that's nearby. But if these are the only parts of the project, I think a notice of intent would be overkill in that regards.
Right, I agree.
So my recommendation, based on that discussion, would be to amend the enforcement order to require submittal of a request to determine applicability. And I had suggested that be submitted by March 12th, so that it could be on the commission's agenda for their meeting of March 27th. That sounds to me like that would still be imminently doable by Mr. Sabatini. And if the commission is amenable, therefore, I would request that the commission confirm and ratify that amendment and the issuance of the enforcement order that states that.
And on that order, you're gonna be responsible for getting that sock out of there come midsummer?
Sure.
Yeah, because that's actually a pain, and that, without removing it, we've done.
As it grows into the ground, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think what Mr. Kovlichuk uses as the contents there is the bark and compost, isn't it?
Right.
So that can just be split, and the compost stuff can be just kind of spread.
Is that a
and scattered.
biosock?
I'm gonna ask him.
I don't think his
But
sock
even if
rots
it's a
away.
biosock, you're gonna have an inch or two, it would be nice to get that out.
Take it out, okay.
Yeah. And it will grow in, and it will,
Be a hassle later on.
Well, you're farming too, because that stuff can actually just be used as a soil amendment. You can just use it and work it in. If you're
Put it out in the field.
if you're tilling some soil, you can use that as a soil amendment.
All right, just dump it out in the field.
Yeah.
So Brian, you're gonna revise this part C then?
Yes, yeah.
To state,
State that he's required to fill out and submit a request to determine applicability instead of a notice of intent application. Again, the complexity of what he's proposing, it doesn't enter into a lot of the structural stuff that was proposed on this plan, so if someone just walked in off the street and they said, oh, that's what I'm proposing to do, but I know I'm in your buffer zone, so I need a permit, that is the type of permit I would recommend that they submit.
do I hear such a proposal?
so moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yep,
Thank you very much.
be good, yep. And, I guess the reason why the highway wants to be the one to put up the barrier is, because they're gonna be responsible for it, and,
Cool.
right, so they didn't.
Yeah.
Now, that notice of applicability, is that something I come into your office and we fill out together? Is that how that works?
Sure, I can help you with that, if you'd like. If you'd like my assistance, I would be happy to help you with it. So, yeah, we can do that. And we'll, as a gentleman's agreement, we'll extend it to that part where you put the erosion control up by the community garden, even though that isn't in the 100-foot buffer zone, the border of vegetated wetlands?
Oh, yeah, 'cause I
Because
know-
you had intentions of grading that, loaming it, seeding it,
That's right,
and
0 and
stabilizing
out.
it, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
here in the public meeting, we'll have a gentleman's agreement that the conditions will also go up there, even though it's not in a regulated wetland area.
Right.
So, since you're gonna want it to look nice anyway, I know you're gonna do
Precisely.
that.
Let's see it. And you don't have any preference of seeding versus hydro seeding? Does that come up
No,
later or no?
no.
Oh, okay. Right, super.
Great. Anything anyone else wanted to address the commission in regards to this matter?
All right, very good.
Thank you very much, Sean.
Yep.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Boss.
Did you sign for the certified letter at all?
I got one.
Did you sign for it?
So,
Oh,
they
okay.
dropped off now.
Okay, they didn't drop any?
I sit over there.
They brought that in both the sides.
Okay.
It's a nice
Right
All
there.
right. Oh,
It's been claimed.
oh, you got it? Oh, okay, good. We checked online and it didn't show that it.
Nope, they just dropped it off and left it.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Mike.
Maybe if you could digest.
You're gonna have to work your way around.
I just didn't know they were stupid.
I cut a fair amount of that, the ones I could. Hey, Don? Don Thurston. Don. You tell these nice folks that I cut down as many of the trees that were threatening your property as possible?
Yes, he did. Spent a good part of the day doing it.
Yeah, right till sundown.
But I do have a problem, is there was 3 trunks, and he cut down 2. And I think,
Well, we can tell them why I didn't cut down the third one, because it goes up 30 feet, and then the rest of it goes off at a 90-degree angle, and it's still like semi-attached.
okay, well, it is no longer attached.
Oh, it's no longer
It's
attached?
laying across from your property over to mine. It has destroyed a pine tree that I had, a maple tree that I had, and it's also laying right across a weeping willow tree, and it's 30 feet in the air.
Do you think there's any way that a mere mortal can help it with gravity get to the ground, or no?
I don't know.
May I have your permission to stop by and take a look? I'm just not gonna kill myself, that's all.
I was just gonna say,
I don't want
you
you
don't
to
wanna
kill
stand
yourself.
under it. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, but I do have a question. The property line between my property and the conservation land to the Grassview Park goes across on the easterly side of the lane, westerly side of the lane. My property line goes before the ditch. On the school side, it's across the ditch. And that ditch has been there back in the 1700s. And it was there to drain the field that the town just bought. All right? And Lawrence Chase, who was Charlie Quinn's father, kept that ditch clean.
Okay.
And my wife keeps that ditch clean. But there's an area up on the up on the far end by towards the school that's got trees on it that are that big around when it comes down, and it laying down, and we can't get to it. And I just want to know, can I have the permission to go in and clean that out it's dead stuff that's just laying there, and it's blocking the,
May I have permission to meet with Don, and we'll go out there and we'll assess the situation, and if
It
there's
is a
something.
common problem, Don, on a lot of these streams, right in this immediate area, and there's been very little done
Well,
from
but anyway,
maintenance.
with your permission, I'll take a look at it. If there's something I need to come back to you folks, I'll come back and see what.
Is that town property?
I don't know, but that's one of the things we can start finding out, is figuring out, once I know where it is, I can start figuring out whose it is and whether I need any other permission or what.
actually, where it is, it's my next door neighbor's land.
Well,
No, it would be on my land.
yeah. Well, we'll take
Because
a look.
that end of the ditch is on my side.
Well, I know there's some plans available now that the town went and purchased that, so we can probably figure that out, one way or the other, whose it is, and then therefore whose permission we might need, and what to do, okay?
All right, good luck.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Okay, do you want me to just read right from this?
Well, where are we?
to.
Oh, we're at the certificate of compliance? Yes, yes.
Okay.
If you could, please.
Brings us to a continued certificate of compliance request, DEP 63-0650, 414 Havel Street, map 14, parcel 34, lot 1, Gateway Trust 2 of 1997. And was this for the chemicals?
Well, you're reading the one for the DEP order of conditions, correct? Then no.
What was this one?
The stormwater one, I believe, has the, well, you wanna just read the
Yeah,
other
I'll
one?
do the-
We'll do them both at once,
Yeah,
how's that?
the next one is a continued certificate of completion request for SMP number 18-2016 at 414 Havel Street, map 14, parcel 34, lot 1, Gateway Trust 2 of 1997.
So, let me start with the latest revised plan, and do you have signed and stamped at least two, if not more?
I think we have four.
You can give me.
This is actually the waiver request to Sandy. I forgot to give that to you earlier.
Okay.
This is
Well,
I think there's at least two in there.
Okay, great, excellent. So we've got a request for a certificate. We'll start off with a certificate of compliance for the order of conditions, because this revision to the plan is a little bit more relevant to that. And let me start off by saying what we're considering tonight is a partial certificate of compliance, because we have a wetlands replication area here. We have invasive species suppression program going on, and we have a constructed planted wetlands plant community in the bottom of this bioretention basin, which all were just established and are all subject to monitoring that goes through an overwintering period, so that we can make sure that things actually get established and survive. So that's why we're dealing with a partial, because the monitoring and stuff.
Is that a 3-year or
I have to look, I don't have it exactly memorized, but normally what we say is at least 2 growing seasons that are separated by an overwintering period.
Okay.
I think, didn't we have, like drought considerations, so in a sense it wasn't planted till the fall?
It was-
So I would hazard a guess that we've probably got, in 2018, we've got the requirement for 2 more monitorings reports, a spring and then a fall, I would suspect.
Yeah.
For those. So one of the reasons the plan needed to be addressed a little bit and revised was, I know it's hard for you folks to see, but there's diagonal hatching now here that actually shows the full extent of the variable width, no cut, no disturbance zone. We started off with a 25-foot, but then in talking with Mr. Coughlin and the way they configured the site, we saw that there was opportunities to bulge it out in certain areas, bring it up and incorporate it with not only the replication area, but also the invasive species suppression and eradication that occurred there. So it turned into a variable width. So in regards to the order of conditions, I can offer you a recommendation that if you so wish, issuing a partial certificate of compliance with ongoing conditions. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 10 different ongoing conditions because this is in the zone 2. So we've got a number of different things. So then let me just.
We're gonna do them both at once, or?
Yeah.
Well, I've got a question,
Sure.
technical question.
Yep.
I can understand the reason for partial on the DEP certificate, but is there any reason why all those circumstances need to be partial on the stormwater management? Can't we just do the stormwater management?
But the wetlands plant community in the bottom of the bioretention basin is part of the stormwater management system, which is governed by the issued stormwater permit, because that is actually mostly outside of the 100-foot buffer zone. I think it is all in the zone 2.
Must be.
Possibly,
Yeah,
although,
the zone
although,
2 goes-
yeah,
yeah.
it might not, some of it might be,
It's
some of it, I don't, yeah, because I don't know, is the zone 2 on here?
See, the zone 2's up.
Is
the
this
top
the
of
zone
page.
2?
That's it right there, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, it is in the zone 2. So it is governed under both permits, but it is, and also it's important to keep the stormwater management permit open, because there was an adjustment made. There was an adjustment of a stone infiltration trench being put in, which kind of intercepts some of the runoff coming from the roadway that slopes in. And there was concern that that could possibly intercept and cause too much infiltration, and that it might negatively impact that planted wetlands plant community by not keeping the soil moist enough throughout the whole season. So that's another reason why it's important for the monitoring to continue to just make sure that we didn't short circuit treatment, because the whole reason for the plant community is that the root systems in the plants and the biological action that takes place is partially a treatment for pollutants that come in with the stormwater. So it's important for the wetlands plant community to be lush and vibrant, or whatever, to do its thing on that attenuation of pollutants. And hopefully that stone interception trench does not take too much moisture and infiltrate it too quickly.
So do I hear a motion?
Wait, come on, let me show you the pictures. You haven't let me show you the pictures yet.
Yeah, I'm gonna play that.
The hockey game's already over.
Yeah, but the morning's coming fast.
No kidding.
All right, I'll go to the short version.
Yeah, go ahead.
But
We don't need descriptions on those matters.
there. So one of the things we did now, and I'm not going to show you the other pictures because you're in a rush here or whatever. But we required that both buildings, in their maintenance, whatever, utility rooms, that they have a spill containment kit available. They also sent me pictures because we asked them to, we actually did an inspection where I identified that both facilities had some cleaning products that were hazardous. And in one of the facilities, they had the stuff sitting right on the floor, and not only that, they had it sitting on the floor behind something else and where the door swung and hit. So they were required to buy tubs that had at least the capacity of
how much gallonage of these cleaning products they had, so if the cleaning products started oozing or leaking, they'd be caught and contained within the plastic tub, so secondary containment for it. And I asked them to put signage on there explaining it, so the first time they change, whoever's doing the maintenance stuff, the next guy coming along doesn't say, oh, what's a stupid tub for, you know, I don't need that, or whatever, so. And I requested that they provide us with pictures, as well as the contact information for the supervisor that's in charge of each building, so just in case, I mean, it's just being precautionary. So anyway, so I can also make a recommendation to the commission that if you so wish, that you could issue a partial certificate of completion for the stormwater management permit, just keeping the monitoring of the bioretention area as open until that gets completed.
Are we doing one motion or two?
One
You can do
motion.
one motion for both if you wish.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Great, thank you. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you. You don't do a presentation.
So you got a,
Two and a half in one night, wow.
Yeah, yeah, I'm a big wig now.
oh, God.
When did Meridian move to the Cumming Center?
I've been there about 7 years now, so it's been a while.
Yes. Is this the report?
Yes.
Thanks for that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good.
Excellent.
Kurt Turner was nice enough to send me an email, and so I did delete 2 things out of there at his suggestion, which you won't even notice because it just reads better.
Was one of them my name?
Huh? I didn't delete your name.
Well, it's David Shinnick, but my name's Dan. And here it says David.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh,
One of my assistants.
not on the signature, but on the, yeah.
We'll fix that. Thank you for pointing that out. We'll get that.
According to this, you started after I did.
I'm sorry?
According to this, you started after I did.
What?
13 and,
Mhm.
13 and a quarter years,
Yeah.
and 14 years.
That doesn't make sense, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Something's wrong there.
Yeah, no big thing.
I'll have to go back to my...
It was so close.
He started
to get-
before you?
But I'm not sure that.
No.
No.
You started before him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'll have to go back and find out what you were looking at for the calculation.
Other than the misspelling of a name and the question on the date, has anybody else found anything wrong with this?
Oh, nice.
Got it.
I got a couple questions. The 81 permit applications, is that supposed to add up all these numbers to
Nope.
81?
No.
Okay, because it was a repeat or something?
No, I actually deleted emergency certification from there because it was splitting it and causing it to go over onto the other page, and that isn't really an application. That's really us reacting to a situation that needs immediate attention.
So
And
instead
in
of just,
fact, I think that
instead
was
of listing just the one?
Yeah.
Okay, all right,
Yeah,
all right. I just wanted to know why it didn't add up, that's all.
That's why it didn't add up. In my opinion, representing it as an application was going to cause more confusion than it was to inform anyone actually reading the document.
Should we revise that number to 81 then, to just reflect the?
Make it 80.
No, I don't.
I could do that
If somebody really wants to
I mean,
add
if
it
somebody
up,
adds it up and they're gonna say, Jesus, it didn't add up, you know?
What's the matter with these guys?
Why don't we leave it there for them to find?
It's not a financial report.
No,
That's true.
I think it's fine.
I can do it.
No, we
easy
always
enough.
got a rule, always leave something for the
You're
auditors.
gonna open the file anyway.
If you want an auditor to find something,
Yeah.
find them what you want them to find.
When I was an auditor, I was aware of that, so I went above and beyond that.
Yeah, you have to be.
Down in the back and read fine.
At least they're gonna show they read it.
On the second page, third paragraph, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down, the agent joined with the State Department
No,
of
there's definitely
Conservation
something
Services,
missing
that's
there.
supposed to be DCR? Department of
Well,
Conservation and.
Department of Conservation
Recreation.
Services is part of DCR.
Also,
It's their part that actually deals with conservation restrictions and comes out, and they were coming out and doing the monitoring because they were trying to catch
So
up.
it's a part of DCR?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I thought
I-
maybe it was supposed to be DCR.
I don't know what the organizational structure really looks like, but it's one of their components, or
Okay.
compartments, or whatever.
All right, so it's right the way it's stated.
I think so, I believe so, although I think I need to put joined with the Department of Conservation Services to conduct monitoring. I think there should be a with in there. Don't you?
Yeah, that would be helpful. Either way, it would work, but the width would help. Yeah. You're gonna be changing the 81 to 80, so you might as well do it.
Time period does that, when it says 2017 annual report, what is the actual?
January to December 2017.
Okay.
So
So our newest member of the open space was not.
That's
a
why
member.
that's why she's
She's
not
not there.
expressed there,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
that's why Jenna Haig is
the other
mentioned
one,
because she
he
was
did- she
confirmed back in
Okay.
August.
The calendar year.
So with the changes noted, do I have a motion to accept this?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
And was there anything else?
Yes.
What?
In looking at Mr. Graham's memorandum, I guess I have a fundamental question. Does the planning board have any authority with regard to stormwater management regulations, or is it our jurisdiction solely?
No, they do have authority under their site plan review process.
But
It's,
do we
well-
share that? Let me tell you why.
we supplement, and we probably have it a little more codified with the regulations we have with our stormwater management bylaw. I'm not sure whether Larry Graham in his review for the planning board has the same type of where we bring the stormwater report and all the stormwater standards from the Wetlands Protection Act, we pull those into the stormwater management permit also, so that we don't duplicate anything, but we use them as like a codified slate that then imposes those conditions, even if the person isn't subject to the Wetlands Protection Act, and therefore not subject to the stormwater management standards under the Wetlands Protection
When
Act.
he's talking about a Massachusetts Stormwater Handbook, Volume 2, Chapter 2, blah, 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 those are standards that we...
Yes, those are the standards promulgated under the
And
stormwater,
then we fall.
yes.
Okay, what, that raises the question in his memo, at least in 3 places, he's talking about suggesting a waiver from those standards. And I think one of the things we need to consider as a board, that since we have authority and jurisdiction with regard to this, as to whether we want to permit those waivers, or whether we want, given the nature of the disturbance and the totality of it here, regardless of the greenness of all this, that as to whether we want to hold them to the strict standard or not.
I guess they better find out what those are and ask them about.
Well,
I hadn't picked up on that.
sounds significant. I mean, he's talking, waiving the separation of at least 4 feet from the basin bottom to the groundwater, and
okay.
2 or 3 other things in here. So under normal circumstances, you might want to consider waiving some things, but in particular with regard to the amount of disturbance here and the concerns of the neighbors and the possibility of appeals and lawsuits, we ought to adhere to a strict standard here.
May I be allowed to find out why he is proposing that? Because he had them go back out and do soil sampling in each of the locations where their basins were proposed. And there may be a valid reason based on soil types, because let me tell you what the reasoning is. The reasoning for that 4 feet of separation is so you don't get a condition that's called mounding. And mounding is when you've already got water going into the ground because you've got a rain event, precipitation event. And the reason for DEP just saying, okay, you need that 4 feet of separation is because the groundwater kind of spreads out and evens itself off in the ground. So even in the area under the stormwater basin, as your stormwater infiltrates, it's going to be coming in from technically from the sides, from outside the basin. But then you've got the water in your basin that's concentrated and is trying to infiltrate down. So the idea is, if you provide this much leeward space, I guess if I can say that, that even if the groundwater level is rising in the ground, there's still room for that concentrated water that needs to infiltrate out of the basin to work its way down. Because otherwise, the hydraulic pressure, if the groundwater has come up and is just a short distance below the bottom of the basin, the hydraulic pressure will not allow the water from the basin to infiltrate and drain down. Isn't it supposed to drain out in like 72 hours or something like that? Yeah. So it may be that the soil types that are there, he feels are not going to cause that mounding, because what you're supposed to do under DEP standards, if you have less than 4 feet of separation, you are then supposed to do a mounding analysis, which basically causes you to look at the scenario of the groundwater level coming up and the types of soils, and whether the water confined in the basin that it is supposed to collect in that rain event has somewhere to go and is not going to be basically kept into the basin, and the basin becomes a pond that doesn't ever drain.
I don't have a problem with your having that kind of discussion with him, but he leads off by saying, given the size and location of the proposed basins, we suggest a waiver may be in order of this rather cumbersome, costly, and unnecessary requirement. That is not technical in my mind.
No, but I think that is engendered by the fact we're talking a basin the size of this table. I think. They're very small, therefore the issue may be kind of moot, and having to do that mounding analysis based on what it's trying to address is not an efficient. He may have made a decision that it just isn't an efficient expenditure of resources.
That should be our determination based on. I mean, I'm just telling you, I have a rather strict mindset about this as we go forward here.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Well, we can ask him questions.
For sure,
Absolutely.
Ask
for an explanation. Just explain this to us. We just want to know why.
Well, I think, obviously, in the fact that I'm able to respond to you with some information here. I believe I gathered some of this. I wasn't asking the direct question on this, but when I had a discussion with him, I was told some of this, so I have some feeling for that there was a justification for why he was saying it. I mean, that is one of the reasons also that you employ a professional to do this, is so that they can also alert you to a situation, or also call into question and say, you know, hey, this needs to be looked at. And he definitely sent them back out to do soil analysis for where the basins were going to be located, specifically, I think, so he could then feel that he wasn't necessarily sanctifying an ineffective design.
Well, this will come up in the future.
Well, it seems to me that.
Depending on how they've reconfigured this thing, stuff, you know, we gotta see whether some stuff stayed in the same place, whether it moved or whatever, I mean.
Well, we don't have anything in question. We wanna have this, we wanna know, we're sure about this.
Yeah.
Because this is gonna come up.
It seems to me it's up to the
Seems to me
applicant.
I could request a detailed explanation to
Yeah.
justify why he feels that way.
Yeah, because this is kinda sensitive.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's very sensitive.
Cumbersome, costly, and unnecessary, and not the kind of standards, and not the rationale that I'd be looking for here. That, you know, if the applicant and the engineer wants to make those arguments, that's fine, but I don't think that the planning board's consultant or our consultant should be arguing in favor of the applicant in terms of something, standards that we should be enforcing.
Yep.
Anyway, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay. All right, all in favor?
Thanks.